Hello, hello. So happy to be here with all of you. Thank you for this opportunity once again. I'm always so happy when I'm sharing these ideas with you. And today, the question was, how exactly does the mind affect the body? You may or may not be aware of this. I recently published a new book, my latest book on the mind-body effect. It's called Heal the Body with Hypnosis. It's already being translated into 2 languages. It's been a massive success, much more than I anticipated, which makes me quite happy, of course. But the launching of that book brought up this question because that is what that book is about. And sometimes before a person reads it, they go, well, how exactly does one thing relate to the other? What is the mechanism, is the question, whereby the mind affects the body? So the question more specifically is, can I actually change my physical body by using mental processes alone, or are the mind and body two such separate entities that they don't quite connect? Well, let's go this one step at a time. First of all, we all know that if we change our behaviors, we will change the body. What are some examples of this? Let me start off with simple ones. Well, if we eat less, we're going to end up losing some weight. Eating less is something that requires a mental change. If a person is used to eating a certain amount of food every day and desserts and chocolate and all of that stuff, and as a result of those behaviors, they've developed an excess weight problem. And then you tell them, look, suppose they come to you and they say, look, I want to lose weight. And you say, okay, you're going to have to eat less. Let's just say, right, we're going to overly simplify this. And they say, I can't. I feel hungry. I feel dizzy. I feel upset. I feel irritable. I need to eat. I'm hungry. So they go out and eat some more. And as a result, the weight continues to, in some cases, increase, because when you look at people across years, usually weight increases. It's kind of a chronic problem until they do something really drastic about it. So in order for that hypothetical person to lose weight, they of course would need a changing behavior, namely in this case, eating less. But that change, it's going to require a huge mental intervention, because it's going to, a person who's used to eating that much, let's say, suddenly you tell them, okay, eat 30% less, whatever the case is, right? I'm not suggesting that these are the right numbers. I'm giving you an example. It's going to change how they feel. And unless the change originates in the mind, in the emotions, unless they develop some mental stamina, some perseverance, they cannot keep up the change for the required length of time to create a weight adjustment. In other words, we can all do something for a day, 2 or 3. We can all go without eating for a day or 2 if we need to in an emergency. We can all adjust, we can go without sleep for a whole night. God forbid you go to a funeral, you stay up all night, let's say, right? We can all handle that for very short periods of time. But skipping one meal today will not take off 50 pounds of excess weight. You know that, and I know that. In other words, if a person says, I want to drop 50 pounds of excess weight, they're going to have to eat less consistently for many, many months. And it is that consistency for many, many months that will require a huge change at the mental level for them to endure, for them to persevere. Okay? So a changing behavior will create a change in the body, and changes in behavior are mental processes. So this is the first mechanism. I'll give you one final example. Everybody knows nowadays that smoking is associated with lung disease. It's a known fact in medical science, as everybody knows this nowadays. So smoke cessation, quitting smoking, is one of the most effective things a person can do to affect their bodies. It's going to change their bodies. Their life expectancy is going to increase statistically. They're going to be healthier. They're going to feel better. In other words, the body is going to change completely once a person quits smoking. So I gave you 2 examples, but you can extrapolate and see how a changing behavior. And once again, in the case of smoking, quitting smoking requires a huge mental change for the person who is an actual smoker. If you're not a smoker and you take a puff of cigarettes and you never do it again, that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the person who's been smoking 1, 2, 3, 4 packs a day for 20 years. That person identifies as a smoker. You tell the person don't smoke anymore. It is a difficult change for that person to make. It is not just nicotine addiction. It is a whole habit. It's a whole behavior. Picking up the cigarette, lighting it up. It's a whole ritual that has become ingrained into their behavioral patterns, right? So a lot goes into quitting smoking, all of which is a mental phenomena. But that mental phenomena that creates a behavioral change, in this example, not smoking anymore, will create a physical change at the level of the physical body. So I'll give you a couple of examples there, and I think I've illustrated the point how a changing behavior, which in itself is a mental phenomenon, will create a change at the level of the physical body. Now, we all know that, and when we talk about the mind-body effect, what people are usually interested in is something a little bit more fancy, let's put it that way. It's like, okay, fine, I know that, but because you have a group of patients in medicine, for instance, who will tell you that they have done everything right. They don't smoke, they don't drink, they don't eat excess meat, whatever, they do this, they do that, they do everything quote unquote right, and they develop some quite serious illnesses. And then the question becomes, well, what behavioral change would I need? In other words, if you told me that I was ingesting this toxin and you asked me for a behavioral change, a mental change that results in me not ingesting this toxin anymore, because that toxin has to do with its illness, I can understand that. But what about the instances where a person or medical science cannot identify a particular behavior that is associated with that illness? And there are plenty of illnesses, degenerative illnesses of all types where we just don't know. It doesn't look like they've done anything to affect their health in that way. And then the question becomes, is it possible to affect the body through the mind alone? And the answer is yes. And both of these answers that I've identified here have been known for quite a while. None of this is new. One of which has to do with what's called the energetic body, sometimes called the quantum body. There are different names that people have come up to describe this body. Now, I think that to the people who follow, who are into these kinds of subjects that I discuss in this channel, what I'm about to say is not new. For some people, it is new. We have multiple bodies. So as an example, what you're looking at here is something that we would call the physical body. Sometimes we call it the dense body because it is the most dense of multiple bodies that we all have. The mind, what we call the mind here, is kind of a body as well. We call it the mental body, and there are many organs in that body. And then you have something called, let's say, a soul, and would say that that's a body as well. In Kabbalah, we study those other bodies, those energetic bodies, bodies that are not tangible at the level of physicality. So there are many, many bodies there. Even in the Bible, to give you an idea, if you don't want to be so extremist talking about Kabbalah, even in the Bible, it talks about more than one death. And that more than one death has a lot to do with what some people call the astral body, right? Which is this part of me that defines who I am. That I, when I say I am Flavio, that I, that entity, is something that also dies. But that's not the physical body. That's not the meat and bones. That I is what sometimes we call the astral body. And this terminology will vary. I acknowledge that according to the school, the tradition, the books you read, the people you follow. And it really doesn't matter what we call them. The point is that there are multiple bodies there. Now, there's another body, oftentimes called the energetic body, sometimes called the etheric body. It's not the same thing as the astral body, which is essentially a mesh of energy that runs through the physical or the dense body. It is not the same thing as the nervous system. This is a question that I get really, really often in classes. But is that the nerves? Are we talking about the nerves? No, the nervous system is the system is something that we can actually see with our eyes. We can cut open the body, and we can see the nerves running through the body. The nerves, or the nervous system, is part of the physical body. It's like essentially, not really, but essentially like a bunch of wiring that control different parts of the body, and also that transmit information back to the brain. So we have efferent and afferent nerves, in other words, nerves that send out signals and nerves that receive signals from the body so that the brain can communicate with the body. They're essentially wires. They're not really metal wires, but they're essentially wiring that controls the physical body. But the energetic body, the etheric body, is not the same thing as the nervous system. So in the Orient, in the East, when you look at the, for instance, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM sometimes they call it, Oriental medicine. Nowadays, you can actually study Oriental medicine, become licensed in Oriental medicine, and it's a fantastic field of study. If you go to an acupuncturist, for instance, you're going to a traditional Oriental medicine sort of doctor. I've done that a whole bunch of times. In fact, for many, many years at our office, we had a doctor of Oriental medicine, a DOM, who did acupuncture, for instance, and we've even published studies showing that we could achieve deeper hypnotic states when we combined it with acupuncture. So we ran a control group. I would come in and hypnotize a few people, and we would measure outcome, such as smoke cessation or relaxation, or sometimes sleep. Did you sleep better? We would track the results, right? And in the other group, the DOM, the doctor of Oriental medicine, would come into the room before I did and put needles into this person's body, designed to relax them first. Then I would come in and do the regular hypnosis session that I did exactly the same thing with the other group, and we would measure outcome in the following days and weeks. And we determined and published articles showing that when we combined acupuncture with hypnosis, we achieved better, faster results. We also published the results of the combination of Reiki with hypnosis and a few other experiments that we did and published. And Reiki is similar to acupuncture in the sense, different modalities, but in the sense that it actually acts upon the same energetic body, the same system that acupuncture acts on. In other words, when you look at what happens in an acupuncture session, you take a very, very thin needle and you insert it very shallow into the skin. I am not, full disclosure, I'm not an acupuncturist. I just worked with one for many, many years, and I have some exposure to it, but I'm not an acupuncturist. So if you are one, and if I say something wrong, please indulge me. I'm just explaining this from my level of understanding, which is purely as a consumer of acupuncture. And of course, if you're an expert, you're going to know things that I don't, and that's obvious. So my description is automatically shallow and superficial, evidently. But in essence, if you look at what they do, right, from a layman's perspective, they take a needle, a very small needle, very thin needle, and they insert it into the skin very superficially, maybe a millimeter or even less, just a tiny little touch on the skin. They leave the needle there, and they come back and they remove the needle. And there's no question, we have 5,000 years of recorded experience showing that they're able to change the body with this insertion of needles in strategic places. Now, from a purely physical perspective, people are still looking for it. They say, okay, what does that do to the body? And the answer is nothing. You take a tiny little needle, you put in the skin, nothing happens. You barely sense it. You feel a little, but nothing else happens from a purely physical perspective, and yet they achieve massive results. Obviously, then, if you look at it, they're not acting upon the physical body with those needles. They're acting upon the energetic body. They're inserting the needles in very strategic locations that they study for many years to learn where they are, called the meridians. I don't know too much about this. These are just the terms that I would hear at the office. The meridians, the channels, this, that, and the other. And there's a bunch of strategic locations that they would know about, and they would say, here's where you have to put a needle, in order to change this or to change that, right? But if you put the needle slightly to the right or slightly to the left, it does nothing. In other words, it isn't the needle in of itself acting upon the physical, dense body. It is the fact that you're altering the distribution of energy in one of those meridians in the energetic body. And so the energetic body connects, as we would say, the unconscious mind to the dense body. The unconscious mind is of a quality that is very dissimilar to the dense body. And so how could they possibly connect unless we had an interface that can connect to both? And that interface that connects to both is the energetic body. So when we have a massive emotional response to something, it changes the energetic distribution through the mesh of energy, the energetic body, which will then eventually, if sustained, affect the dense body, the physical body. So the energetic body, the etheric body, sometimes called the quantum body, the body upon which doctors of Oriental medicine act, the mesh of energy, that body is one of the mechanisms through which the mind connects to the dense body, the physical body as we know it. In other words, in Western understanding of medicine, we kind of skip that body. We talk about, we know that there's a mind, and yet, if you read one of my books, The Philosophy of Therapy, and also the healing book, we talk about the existence of the mind, because in philosophy, some people even question the very existence of the mind, that they think of brain function only. But if there is a mind, and there is a physical body, the connection between the two is questionable. We kind of skip that in Western medicine, but not in Oriental medicine. It is that energetic body that connects one to the other. So there are two ways to change the body through this pathway. One is to act specifically on the energetic body. You can do that with any energy medicine modality. Acupuncture is one of them. It changes that energy distribution. Reiki is another example. And all of these different modalities that fall under the category of energy medicine, all of this have been proven in one way or another, to one extent or another, and they're all similar in the sense that they're not really acting upon the physical. They're acting upon the energetic, which will then affect the physical. As a result, all of them act a little bit slower. Why? Because you're going through kind of the cause. It's like me saying that, look, even the light from the sun takes 8 minutes to get to the earth, which means that if you and I could hit a switch right now and turn off the sun, you would still see sunlight for 8 minutes, because it's coming all the way from over there. It takes 8 minutes to get over here. So I'm not sure that that's a good analogy, but what I'm saying is the energetic body slowly affects and influences the physical body. And so when we act on the energetic body, the effect on the physical will take a little bit longer. But the reason why we do it is because it is much longer lasting, much more permanent. If we can affect a change in the energetic body, you're going to create permanent results. When you alter the chemistry of the physical body, you get quick results, but they're very short-lived. In other words, if a person has pain, right? They hit their toe on the corner of the sofa, whatever, it hurts like crazy. They take an analgesic, they take a chemical painkiller, let's say. If it's a powerful enough chemical, they'll instantly feel relief. It's not going to hurt anymore. But as soon as the concentration of the medication drops in the blood, as soon as the effect of the medication goes away, the pain comes back. In other words, fast acting, but also it quickly goes away. So if we act only on the physical body, we get quick results, but also quick remission of results, and we have to keep on doing it. If you act on the energetic body, you get slightly slower response, yes, but also it tends to last longer because the change is much more permanent. Now, the body above that, if you will, energetically speaking, would be the mental body, the unconscious. The unconscious influences the energetic body, which then influences the physical body. All right, there's another mechanism of interaction between mind and body, which is much more physical, if you will, but it is a long-term effect between mind and body. And that has to do with something called epigenetics. In one of my books, the Awesome Again book, if you go to section 4, I believe, The Science of Awesomeness, section 4, starting on page 78, you can read all about it, The Science of Awesomeness. And one of the things that we discuss in this book, and by the way, this book was a bestseller on Amazon, and it is now in revision for its second edition. I'm so proud of this book, you know. But anyway, it's going into its second edition already, massive revisions, a much better version of it. I really like this. I think of all of my books as a living organism that evolves. And in all of my books, I invite you, the reader, to offer your opinions, questions, suggestions, and I update them. I think that that's awesome. I think that a book should be organic and should be evolving, right? So this second edition is going to be a better version of this. I'm just so proud of it. I think it's a great piece of work. But of course, I'm being a little suspect in saying this, I get it. But when you read it, you're going to understand why I say this, and I'll make a parenthetical comment here. It's just that the time in my life when I wrote this was very peculiar because I was going through a crisis myself. And this book is about 47,000 words, I believe, and it was written in something like 27 or 25 days, I forgot, but in a few days. And I used to get up at 2 in the morning, work, you know, and it was a very peculiar time in my life. And in some ways, I miss that because, you know, nowadays to write, I'm currently about to publish another book, and it's taken a couple of months to prepare it. And it's like, whoa, you know, comparing to these times. Okay, so one of the things that we discuss in this book is in terms of epigenetics. Epigenetics is the science that studies selective gene expression. What does that mean? The fact that a person has a particular gene in their DNA does not mean that necessarily that gene will be expressed. And if a gene is not expressed, whatever function it serves will not be satisfied. So there are genes that we want to be expressed, and there are genes that we do not want to be expressed. As an example, there's a class of genes in medicine that we call oncogenes. Those are genes that, when expressed, they create cancer. Because cancer is an illness of unchecked cellular reproduction. That's why they create tumors. In other words, cells begin to proliferate, they begin to reproduce, they begin to grow, they begin to have little baby cells, right? They begin to reproduce themselves in a way that is not organized. Because normally, cells only grow under certain, not growing size, they multiply or they reproduce under certain conditions. And when you study the cell cycle in a science called cytology, the study of the cell, you notice that there are a number of checkpoints that nature, I suppose, built into the reproductive machinery of the cell to make sure that it's okay to create a daughter cell. They actually call this mother cells and daughter cells. Well, in general, the illness of cancer is an illness of that mechanism, meaning that you have unchecked cellular proliferation. Now, the reason why there are so many kinds of cancers with so many different names is because the name of the cancer refers to the tissue being affected. And so there are tons of them because there are different kinds of tissues in the body. But in general, what you have in common in any cancer is unchecked cellular proliferation. Well, the point I'm saying is that there are genes that interfere with these checkpoints and create unchecked cellular proliferation. Therefore, they're called oncogenes. As an example, in terms of breast cancer, a number of genes have been identified that, when expressed, increase quite a bit the likelihood of a lady developing breast cancer. And that's a whole different topic. But the point I'm making here is that there are certain genes that we would want to have them expressed because they create, a youthful body, let's say, and there are other genes that we don't want expressed. So in order for, let's say you're a man my age, I'm 57, and testosterone is a hormone that becomes an issue, that becomes critical. Testosterone, by the way, is also important for women, very, very important for women's health. Clearly, the amounts of testosterone that are healthy for a woman is different from the healthy levels for a man. But if a woman has very low testosterone for a woman, she will also have negative health effects. So testosterone is important for everyone, but in different amounts, of course. So men have a higher testosterone level. Well, how is testosterone made? It's made by several types of cells in the body, the testicles and other cells, but mainly the testicles. But the way it happens is the cell that makes testosterone takes in a precursor, which is cholesterol. And when a gene is expressed, it is going to, the gene that encodes for testosterone has to be expressed. In other words, the cell has to receive a signal that says, okay, go to the library. The library is the DNA, a molecule that contains all of this information. The molecule has 30,000 genes, give or take. It says, okay, find the gene or find the instructions on how to make this particular protein called testosterone. So the signal comes into the cell and activates that particular gene. When that gene it's going to be transcribed, transcripted, that gene is going to be expressed and is going to create a result, in this case, testosterone. Well, this is called gene expression. A person may have a set of testicles, but if those genes are not being expressed, testosterone is not being manufactured. So you can always supplement it. You can always take in exogenous testosterone. You can inject it, you can put it on the skin, it will be absorbed, and you can have higher levels of testosterone. This is one example. We have 30,000 genes, but there's a reason why those cells are not producing as much of it anymore, right? So what we want in selective gene expression is we want to express more of certain genes, create more of those products, and less of other genes. The science that studies all of this is called epigenetics. Now, it turns out in epigenetic studies that emotions and behaviors affect gene expression. So if a person is always angry, as an example, there's a particular neurochemical pattern in their bodies. If I'm always angry, I have higher cortisol levels and a bunch of other hormones, neuropeptides, neurotransmitters. That pattern creates like a signature, a chemical signature for that person that you and I would identify as anger. That person is angry. We can actually tell if a person has been angry looking at their neurochemistry without looking at the person, just as we can tell what you've been eating by looking at your blood without even talking to you. You know this if you've been to the doctor lately. There is something called, glycation is a process whereby a carbohydrate connects to a protein. And to make a long story short, we have a protein in the blood called hemoglobin. That's the one that transports oxygen and carbon dioxide back and forth between the lungs and the tissues. And if there's too much sugar in the blood, sugar molecules will attach to that hemoglobin. So, make a long story short, when you go get your blood tested, you will see in there somewhere something called HA1C. H stands for hemoglobin, and the A1C test measures how much glycation there has been. We think that those cells live about 90 days. So if your HA1C is high or elevated, it means that on the average for the last 90 days, there has been high blood sugar. If it's low, it means that on the average in the last 90 days, there has been low blood sugar. So looking at blood results, we can tell For instance, if a person tells me, no, I've been fasting, I haven't eaten anything, I don't eat desserts, whatever, we don't have to discuss this. I can look at the blood and say, wait, your H1C is through the roof. You've been eating a lot of sweets. Your blood sugar has been high somehow. What I'm saying is, this is a very quick example of, and there are different reasons why H1C would be elevated, insulin resistance. But the point I'm making is this: by looking at the chemistry in the body, we can kind of know what has been happening there. Same thing happens for emotions. Anger produces a neurochemical signature, just as diet produces a chemical signature in the blood in the form of HA1C, as I just described. So that particular chemical pattern consistent with anger or any other emotion, same thing goes for happiness. That particular soup of chemicals that will be in your body if we're angry or happy or any other consistent emotion will activate certain genes and inactivate other genes. And when we begin to, and why does nature do this? So that we can cope, right? So if I'm consistently angry, I need to develop certain features that are very different from the person who's consistently happy. And the development of those physical features, which at the end of a few years you can see stamped on the person's face. If you pay attention to facial features, you can tell what the prevailing emotion is. You can tell that they've been frustrated most of their lives. It takes a few years to get there, but you can see, looking at a person's face, it becomes stamped. And how does that happen? Selective gene expression. So by altering the mind, emotions, feelings, we alter gene expression. This is not my opinion. This has been amply documented in medical science. There are books written about this. I summarize some of this research in this book, but there are many studies on this topic. It's called Epigenetics. And by changing gene expression, up or down, depending on the genes, we do change the body. Anyway, this video has run way too long. You know, it's funny. This morning I was taking a shower and I was saying, okay, I'll record a quick video answering the question because somebody asked me the question, how does the mind affect the body? I figured, dude, that's a quick one. I'll do this in 3 minutes. But I have a communication style informed by my years as a teacher, and I like to provide lots of examples, and I like to explain the same thing in 2 or 3 different ways, because when you're in a large classroom, people learn differently. Some people learn by example, some people learn by direct instruction, some people learn differently. And as a teacher, you get used to explaining the same thing in different ways. And as a result, these videos tend to run long. I always tell myself, okay, this is a quick one, 3 to 5 minutes, I make the point. But I find that if I explain it that way, something happens. I find that a person might understand the point, they might learn something, but it doesn't produce a change. I find that when a person engages with the conversation, the examples, and they hear the same explanation in different ways, while they're going through the process of participating in the video with me, they're making a change. And so what I humbly hope to do is to do a little bit of what we do at the office in terms of therapy, in terms of encouraging growth and change through these videos. And if you like it, please let me know. And one of the ways that you can help reaching more people would be by subscribing to the channel. I would be really appreciative if you would subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, offer me your comments. Blessings to all of you. See you next time.